It's Monday, January the 8th. It's the day after I posted the video showing me making modifications to my wooden computer case. And I just got to switch that channel now so I can look at some of the stuff here. I've gotten a number of comments, not specifically on that video, but more on the other video that I put on this channel on installing the hardware about airflow through the case. And I keep getting the comment about positive pressure. I guess it's a widely held idea because I keep hearing it over and over again from people. And it doesn't apply to this case. I mean, you could make this case to work that way, but it would be kind of a stupid way to do it because people don't seem to understand how this thing works, like the way, like the idea behind it. It's not a complicated thing to understand. It's just when your mind is taken over by this idea that there's only one way that's good for this, and that's this positive pressure idea. It's almost like they think that the positive pressure will keep dust out of the case, but that pressure has to come from somewhere. You have to take it from outside. So if you take it from outside the room, outside the case, of course, it's going to be dusty air, and you have to filter it before you shove it into the case. So that's kind of the idea here, is that you will have a larger filter area to filter the air more efficiently because you'll be using the whole surface of the filter, and it will be at a much lower pressure. If you have two fans pumping air into the case and you need to filter the air that's going into those fans, you could set up an arrangement like this, put a big filter, make a big box, put those fans on the output side of the box so that they're blowing into the case, but immediately you've added like 20 or 30% to the volume of the case because you have to make that plenum, I guess you could call it, where the filter would go. The other way is to put small filters on the fans, and of course they will plug quicker because they are a smaller area and the pressure or the velocity of the air going through is much higher. So you'll have to clean them more frequently, of course, too. So I'm going to compare the typical idea for PC case cooling to a room. Say I'm comparing it to this room right here. This is not a very big room. It's 10 feet wide, 10 feet long, 8 feet tall. But if I had a stove in here creating heat, say it's over there behind the camera, and I wanted to get that heat out because, okay, say I'm using the stove to cook supper and it's heating up the room unacceptably. I want to get that heat out. And also, the heating up of the stove may cause it to fail prematurely. So there are a couple of ways to do that. There is one to open the window on the front of the room, all right, and put a fan in that, and a window on the back of the room and put a fan in that. This fan blows into the room, that fan blows out of the room. So that obviously moves air through the room, but it doesn't move it as effectively as if you didn't use the window in this wall, if there was a window here at all, that is, and knocked out this entire wall and put a big filter in front of it, and then just use the fan in the other window to pull air through the room. So you'll get a whole room full of air coming through and not just a specific path. And this gets even worse if the room is not as empty as this is, say. It has a lot of things in there like file cabinets or dressers or whatever, lots of obstacles that you could possibly walk through. Say you can walk from this wall to the other wall. That's the path that wind that's blowing in from this fan over here in the window would take to reach the other window. So it would leave the perimeter of the room, basically untouched. So that's the basic idea with this. I've had comments about people saying, well, it's sucking air in through the cracks. If the cracks are small, it won't pull air in through the cracks. It'll pull You know, airflow is like electricity. It takes the path of least resistance. And the path of least resistance in this case, if it has a new clean filter in it, is through that filter, because it offers very little resistance to the airflow going in. It will pull through that filter before it pulls through any of the cracks that are around. So I can leave this thing running constantly day and night for 3 years, like I did in the previous configuration, and only a very small amount comparatively. I mean, if you look at most PC cases, after a couple of months, they're clogged with dust, will collect inside the case because it's all being filtered before it comes in. Then that brings up the idea of how much airflow you actually need. Well, the things that are producing the most heat inside my computer case are the 2 graphics cards, and they are really only doing that when they're rendering a video. The video program that I use, the editing program, uses those graphics cards to do all of the heavy lifting as far as the editing goes and the rendering goes. So they get quite warm when it starts to render a video. Now, the video cards themselves have fans built in. They both have 2 fans built in, and those will spin up when they start to get warm, and they'll push the heat out. And then that heat that gets pushed out needs to be taken away. And an efficient way to do that is to knock the end wall out of your room and put a couple of good fans in the other side there, so you get a whole wave of cool, fresh air coming in all at once, and not a little tiny patch of it from a window out back. So I have everything finished here now. I'm happy with the noise situation. I left off in the last video on here saying it was a little bit too noisy. I made a change to that. I added foam. I took the fans off. I had them screwed on first, and then I had them glued on just by the rubber ears that are on there directly onto that bezel, and that wasn't quite enough. Then I took them off altogether, and I put in foam strips that I cut about, I don't know, 3/8 of an inch thick, and just put those down, and then I glued the fans on top of those. So the foam is glued to the case and the fans are glued to the foam, and that effectively isolates the fan's vibration from the case, and it immediately cut the sound, the volume of the sound that I was hearing from these, in half. I don't know if you can hear the difference. You'd have to go back and listen to the end of the other video to make the comparison. And I don't know if the camera, well, the mic is right up above me here, so I don't know if the situation is exactly the same, but it is tolerable. I can still hear it, of course, but it's very tolerable. And that's it. And the fans that are in the back, they're controlled by, I finally did manage to get into bias, by the way. A commenter pointed it out, and this is one of the rare times when the commenter actually points out some useful information. He said that the monitor needs to be plugged into the first one, and I had that and before at some point, and then I changed it around, and then it went black, and I didn't connect the dots there for some stupid reason. Anyway, I switched that around, and I got into the BIOS, and I set the fan control, because they're PWM fans and they're plugged into the motherboard. I set the fan control to MSI Smart Fan, and that controls the fan speed. As the temperature within the case climbs, the fans will speed up to a maximum of 100%, of course. So that's basically it. That's how this thing works. This is not a solution for a normal PC case, the kind that I had before. You would be better off with that positive pressure situation and just clean those filters, often, so that you don't slow down the airflow, because there's just so much crammed into the typical normal PC case. It's like that room filled with too much furniture. The air can't circulate as well as a relatively empty room like this case is right here.